Let's talk How to Train Your Dragon. This is up there as one of the greatest trilogies out of the whole DreamWorks set. This series right here is one of the emblematic animated movies of all time. Is that too much to say? I really don't think so. And the fact that I haven't covered it yet is criminal and paradoxical. What's worse is, I haven't even seen the third movie yet. I think it's because I see these movies in such high regard that I kinda don't want it to end. But it did, ages ago now. And we're pedaling back to the very start of it all. To the original How to Train Your Dragon, and the best scene to break down. Of course, every scene is a masterpiece in its own right, with some fantastical themings to go along with it. But today I wanted to cover the most iconic in this iconic franchise, the bit everyone remembers the best. It is, of course, the scene where our two titular characters meet for the first time, and kick off the first beat in their unbeatable adventure. For a bit of backstory, don't worry, I'll keep it brief this time. This is a fantastical Viking-inspired world where dragons are hated by all. On the two choices of, wow, dragons, what mystical creatures they once were, but gone for centuries they have been. I wonder if one day these magical beasts will return. And the other one, this is definitely, Jesus Christ, so many dragons! How do we get rid of all these dragons? Kind of territory. Hiccup is naturally our wimpy protagonist who's gonna bridge the gap between humans and dragons, and for conflict reasons, he's the son of the chief of the whole dang village. And after a large battle last night with a horde of dragons, Hiccup successfully shot at the fabled Night Fury, and after a scolding, has ventured out the next morning in search of his chance of acceptance.
He's probably out there now.
All the while, his dad has always been concerned for how different his son turned out, unsure of his identity despite being so sure of himself when he was his age. Hiccup forcing himself to be something he's not in order to try to fit in, despite clearly not. And on that reveal that his son is likely continuing to disobey him, by venturing outside to cause trouble again, we cut right to his son doing exactly that. First, a bird's eye shot of the glorious mountains for some environmental artist's resume, before cross-dissolving over to Hiccup's map, very simply establishing that Hiccup is well out of the boundaries of their civilization and has travelled extensively in search of his claim.
Oh, the gods hate me.
And since this is a scene with just a single character right now, there's not exactly much in the ways of dialogue to express the thoughts of our characters, other than physical actions and randomly talking to oneself. Scribbling out several crosses in a clear display of frustration for being unsuccessful, yet again, at a task they had given themselves. Hiccup is a character full of self-loathing at this moment in time for being the abject failure he is, or as his father puts it, every time he goes outside, something terrible happens. If following the orders of his fellow men, Hiccup would be shackled to a life of standing still and simply staying out of the way. It is positively embarrassing, unfulfilling, and kind of emasculating in this clearly masculinely built society. It's the foundational motivations pushing Hiccup to go past his comfort zone. It's a crying out for anything of value to be struck upon him, to gain any sort of approval and need from his group. Until that is found, Hiccup remains as an angry and self-hating character with little redeeming qualities. Everyone must hate him, even the divine gods as far as Hiccup is concerned.
Some people lose their knife or their mug. No, not me. I managed to lose an entire dragon.
Saying it right out for us, Hiccup has even lost his victory dragon as well. Even in his victories, which no one else seems to believe or acknowledge, he fails for not being able to confirm or gather the kill. All the while, check out the environmental background. It's a deep and dense brownish forest with a thick, dense fog in the background. Thematically, Hiccup is so incredibly lost. Not to the point of not seeing 1 meter in front of him, but enough that he cannot dictate his place in the wider picture, both literally and metaphorically, as he has no esteemed place in his world right now. Add to that the color palette of his costume, similarly blazed in greys and browns. His character is unfulfilled and drab, with no driving inspiration or form of content other than a grumbly objective to dig themselves out of their self-worth hole.
Ow!
But against this expansive forest, gigantic in scale compared to Hiccup, we have a breakthrough, a literal breaking, as it's a step in the right direction to all of Hiccup's wishes and dreams, but not before establishing him as a weakling just a little more. It's a pathway downward, the trajectory of the fallen beast, which now switches up the camera. No longer are we cutting between distant shots and back to up front. It's now all a oneer, following as we too come to witness this revelation alongside Hiccup, matching the timing of witnessing the result at the same time as his with... It's just a tease of a view, but an entirely natural one. There may be too many damn dragons, but they are still mystical creatures. And seeing one up front in this context is a lot different to up close in a hostile way, as we now cut again to Hiccup's front, obscuring himself with some of that tree log, both as a way to soak in his expression, stunned to have witnessed such a creature with a hint of optimism for perhaps the first time in his life, plus it means we don't get to see it as much, keeping the audience retention time up high through a lack of exposure. Until we do slowly get the reveal. But still not entirely. First, there's Hiccup's giant head in the center of the frame, not even in focus, but obscuring us from seeing it even more. And even as it does slowly move out of the way, the dragon itself a fair distancer, partially blocked again by the rocks on the surface. Again, enough to keep you intrigued, but still not giving away the full satisfaction. Cut back to Hiccup, who's to go through a whole mini arc of his own through expression alone. He knows what he has to do, but deep down knows it's not at all his field of expertise. After all, just the fact that Hiccup came equipped with only the smallest of daggers shows how woefully unprepared this boy is. Clearly having a tool not fit for killing an entire living dragon, let alone a downed one. But alas, his desire to push forward and pull himself out of his dire circumstances carries forwards as Hiccup switches to determination, now that he's done nervously jittering the knife around. Well, kind of. Though his determination may be clear, his true feelings are present in everything his body is telling the audience. Not only did that knife come out ill-prepared and certainly not from a place of control, but even Hiccup taking a few paces forwards comes across as terrified and unskilled, needing an exhale just to make such minute progress. Everything in Hiccup's body is telling him he doesn't want this, and thus the conflict builds. And yet, with another mimicking camera motion, this time even more so as it's full-on first person, not third person, we get to see the dragon more up front and see that it is totally tired and completely unconscious. The idea that this beast is a threat quickly disappearing as it is demonstrably not even present. And so we see Hiccup start to grow in confidence due to the simple miscommunication here that he thinks that it is dead.
I did it. Oh, I did it. This fixes everything. Yes!
It's a cause for celebration as Hiccup comes to terms with the domino effect this update brings, whilst at the same time not necessarily fooling the audience on the idea that the beast is dead. Not only because it's on the movie poster and a more modern audience is aware of the concept of this trilogy and also the fact that this is a trilogy series, but also just in the camera position. For a moment of true victory, you would usually expect a similarly optimistic camera effect, be it a simple low angle to bolster up the scale of our character, or maybe like a spiraling motion around them, or to look up into the sky or something, but there's none of that. It's just a static shot where Hiccup doesn't even look that grand. It's the camera telling us he's wrong by not reacting at all in comparison to him. All these subliminal techniques to influence how the audience is to perceive this first interaction. And then...
I have brought down this mighty beast!
Kicking him down yet again. The beast isn't dead, and even just the smallest motion has Hiccup jumping right back to a rocky wall. The camera following with him more handheld this time with a bit of a swing to it. It's uneasy, just like Hiccup is. Now we're really getting somewhere. And Hiccup is right back to that scared little boy he really is in a confrontation, sending his knife out with no real plan of action, not even using it correctly. With barely any movement at all, the dragon has all of the control in the scene, for their opposition being so clearly out of control. And then we get... Whoa, incredible piece of cinematography there, and apparently it was an accident at first. Apparently it was always to be shut, that eye, but an animation glitch had his eyelids open. so they plugged it in with that out-of-focus wing as a motivator for the transition. This is just iconic, and the soundtrack only brings it in more with that slow drawl and the symbols on his iris reveal. It's all there to build up a slow tension with the slow camera motion, just to pay it off with a single intimidating non-movement. Ah, so good. And it's not even an expression of outright hostility. You can perceive it this way, but it's more like a suspicious watching. After all, Hiccup doesn't exactly come off as blasé as, say, any of the other Vikings in existence at this point. Any in existence at all. Perhaps Hiccup's shortcomings as a worthy foe was actually a plus that saved him from certain maiming. Or maybe the dragon could just naturally sense the kind-heartedness behind the boy. Not to mention, Hiccup doesn't jolt when seeing the eyes either. Instead just staring as well, as the dragon's gaze turns more into a sense of, so, what are you gonna do? Hiccup's response again seems unsure, pitiful, empathetic for the first time, even loosening up more the closer they meet each other's eyeline, only for the conflict of the scenario to continue forwards.
I'm gonna kill you, dragon.
Even just surmising those words first requires a full inhale and exhale. It's a difficult task to commit according to Hiccup's body, but it's one his mind is devout to carry through with, just calling it dragon like the beast it really is. And for once, the camera is empowering, albeit only slightly. We're at a low angle now, as Hiccup is in the position to make the killing move against the dragon haplessly draped over a chunk of the frame. But will he really follow through with it?
I'm gonna cut out your heart and take it to my father. I'm a Viking.
These words are hyperbole. As the camera moves in to become more low-angled and less on the dragon, Hiccup is being strengthened more in our perspective, but his words are particularly harsh. Even the act of knifing out the dragon's heart, excluding the idea of even a merciful death first. It's the words he has ingrained to take on. It's the concept he is hoping to become in order to be accepted, and judging by those brief moments out of character, it's so clearly not him. It is just his idyllic understanding of what it is to be a Viking.
I am a Viking!
And though he is assuring that he will reach this stretch goal of his, after his words come out, there's that little expression of doubt. Plus a clear stature that is not that of a standard muscular Viking. Intercepted in the middle is another shot of the dragon's eyes, now with Hiccup in view, unchanged. As if the dragon itself doesn't believe the words he is saying, or is now hoping to reach out to his better nature. All these interpretations can be extracted from the same damn iris, it's incredible. And so comes the final moment. Hiccup lifts the knife above their body, the camera jumps to a close-up of their face, no dragon even in sight, like it's readying for a death off-screen. And then... he opens his eyes. It's a moment of sympathy that is unavoidable, trying to do so far by just looking away or closing his eyes the whole time. The dragon continues to stare, judgingly, unafraid, wanting assistance and sensing a friendly nature in him already. And all it takes is an extra long take and a swelling orchestra for Hiccup to finally react, most like himself than he ever has done before. No, not yet. First, he's got to reiterate it. He can't be swayed so quickly. This is his entire livelihood here. This is everything he needs to fix his issues. So he goes for it one more time, keeping those eyes shut to ignore the pain, and even the dragon too seems to have acknowledged and accepted their own death. Everything is lining up for the exact success Hiccup has been wanting, but he doesn't want it. Not this way. It's just not him. As the orchestra stops, so too does Hiccup. He's just not an aggressive person. He can't attack a wild animal, much less an injured one. It's just not right. He hates himself for it, but in a different way to how he usually hates himself. This isn't an act of self-defense. This is simply an act of cruelty if he were to go through with it.
I did this.
There's even a sense of remorse there. So now he looks at this at a different perspective. He did this. First, an act of valiant victory, a win for humanity, dominating against the strongest subspecies of this demonic creature, but also, he did this. wounding a wild animal, leaving it defenseless and trapped in the wilderness, unable to move, let alone feed itself. It is Hiccup coming to terms with the consequences of his actions, shed away from the peer pressures and celebrations of this barbaric behavior. It's a turning point against the very upbringing he has been given back at home. Now shot equal to the dragon in the two-shot, as they are both of equal value. They are both a single life, neither more important than the other. And so, we now switch from focusing on the eyes of the dragon to focusing on the body, trapped, entangled in a web of ropes. It is the dragon's dilemma we are addressing, as our perspective switches to one of more empathy. And with yet another sigh on Hiccup's behalf, armed with the exact tool to help this injured creature, the music is uneasy. First that smash when the eyes jolt open, and then the scratching violins as Hiccup scuffles to cut each rope loose piece by piece. The dragon staring down at Hiccup, surprised but not delighted, as it is still a wild and confused animal, culminating only into perhaps one of the more naturalistic responses. First, it's a wide angle, showing us a bit of that scale difference with the dragon's full body. Then it's over the shoulder for Hiccup's horrifying perspective, and then following as he's pushed back to the rock by the neck. Such a visual interaction. Camera shaking with the impact as it stops at the rocks. And then over the shoulder on the dragon as we look down to the feeble Hiccup, pinned down against the darkness, covering half of the frame. It's a demonstration of power cinematically, and a demonstration of power from the creature. Finishing up with that crescendo against the full face of the beast, and a little lick of bagpipes in there too for some classic Scottish goodness. It's just a stare down of dominance as Hiccup is reduced to speechlessness. Eyes of anger and yet control, peering down at Hiccup as the main theme is remixed into this bagpipes motif. Bracing for what can be perceived as a finishing move for the dragon, preparing its body, pulling back on Hiccup, and then blasting from the mouth. But no, it's a simple roar this time. A similarly merciful move in response to a merciful move. A warning shot, if anything else. And though still a horrible sound that visibly shakes the camera, it's more like that of a pet, as is the inspiration for the animated moves of Toothless. Everyone knows this fact, but references of real cat movements were used to motivate a lot of their movements. And just as quickly as it responds, it flees, actively screeching to the human not to push it, not to follow it, and not to do that again, as it leaves the scene, over the shoulder kind of from Hiccup's view as it disappears behind the leaves. The composition now returning back to more of those foggy background trees that were missing for the most part when Hiccup was alongside the beast, only for us to follow along with some more telling shots. This isn't the end of the story, and the dragon is not without weakness. Clearly still a wounded animal of some sort, struggling to fly straight and impacting with obstacles along the way. It may put on a brave face, but it is still in need of some sort of assistance. Not as absolutely powerful as it previously was. And leaving Hiccup practically out of breath as its howls can still be heard in the distance. Once again powerless with this indifferent camera and a pose that's clearly vulnerable. If not for his next action... standing idly by as the creature continues onward, vaguely holding the knife. Not contributing to the scene as an active member, but more like a lowly observer. And then... dropping that emblematic knife of his hostile intent and masculinity and falling to the ground from his shaky legs. An understandable response, but one of weakness nonetheless. As we then cut right back to Mr. Manly Man Father. This scene doesn't actually do too much on the action front. It's a relatively simple scene. But it's the foundation that sets up a very slow relationship build-up that leads to an incredible story. With Hiccup's conflict and self-worth coming to the forefront against a clearly very wild animal with an assortment of emotions of its own. eventually being explored more for its pet-like attributes, Hiccup's place in his society, the symbiotic relationship the two can create for each other in a way that benefits both, and the eventual confrontation of this entire friendly interaction against the clearly dragon-despising collective that will be expecting answers. It's an iconic scene from an iconic series, and who'd have thought one of its most iconic features was originally a bug in some animator's program? Well, for now, I'm gonna end it off here. My name's been Daz, you didn't really care, and I'll see you in a bit.